Craft matters. In small ways, like how a coffee is brewed. And in not so small ways, like how your money is cared for. Which is why for 160 years, UBS has elevated banking to a craft. Tailoring unique strategies that combine human expertise with the latest technologies. All happening across 24 time zones and 12 key financial hubs. With you at the heart of it all. UBS. Advice is our craft.
You're listening to The Globalist, first broadcast on the 21st of November 2025 on Monocle Radio. The Globalist, in association with UBS. Live from London, this is The Globalist. I'm Chris Chermak. Coming up on today's programme.
Boycott politics never work. It's always best to be inside the tent than being outside of the tent.
South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa navigates an on-again, off-again diplomatic relationship with the United States as he prepares to host the G20 summit. After that, we'll speak to the chair of Cyprus Parliament's Foreign Policy Committee about signs that Greek and Turkish Cypriots could once again be ready to revive peace talks. We'll also talk about the ever-deteriorating relations between Japan and China, and then
we learned another lesson in media management from US President Donald Trump, who does not, we learned, care for follow-up questions, especially from women.
Andrew Muller asks what we learned this week. We'll also have a wrap of stories from the world of arts and culture and ask what the heck is happening with the Miss Universe pageant in Thailand. That's all up ahead here on The Globalist, live from London. First, look at what else is happening in the news. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he's willing to talk seriously with President Donald Trump about a US-backed draft peace plan to end the war with Russia. Japan's cabinet has approved a new 21.3 trillion yen or $135 billion economic stimulus package, and Brazilian food products, including beef and coffee, have been exempted from US tariffs that were first imposed in July. Stay tuned to Monocle Radio throughout the day for more on those stories. But first, South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa is taking center stage today for a summit of the Group of 20 G20 nations, or maybe that should be Group of 19, as US President Donald Trump has chosen to boycott the event and in turn has suggested South Africa should be kicked out of the bloc. The rest of the world's leaders will be discussing how to keep multilateralism alive in such strange and complex times, as well as issues that are particularly important to the African continent, which is hosting the G20 for the first time. Well, I'm joined now by Anthony Squatson, Bloomberg News Africa senior reporter in Johannesburg, and by Tara O'Connor, founder and executive director of Africa Risk Consulting, a pan-African consulting company. Good to have you both on the show. I'm going to start with you, Anthony. What's the mood on the ground over there in Johannesburg? Are people bullish about this summit, despite some of the controversies leading up to it?
Thanks, Chris. Yes, I think generally people are quite bullish. I think that the boycott by the US is obviously not ideal, but it does seem to have strengthened South Africa's relations with a lot of its long-term traditional partners, which have been testy in the last few years, like the European Union. There's been a lot of support for South Africa's position, and I think most of the countries attending have indicated that they will do their best to make the meeting a success. A bit of a spat late yesterday when the US suggested sending their deputy ambassador in South Africa to receive the handover of the G20 from Ramaphosa. So that's a bit of that's the latest in the fight between the two countries that's happened.
Yes, there has been a sort of last-minute fight over whether there would be any U.S. participation at all. Tara, to bring you in on this, I mean, without the U.S. there, as Anthony was saying there, perhaps strengthening South Africa's resolve, what are South Africa's, and Africa's for that matter, priorities for this summit?
Well, I think, in a sense, I think the fact that Donald Trump will not be there, he's famous for taking all the oxygen out of the room. I think the G19 has got the possibility of actually becoming an important one, and actually also showing how the world and how Africa can operate without the USA, which is the de facto position, effectively, and see where things can be done with the absence, a very prominent absence of the US. And I still think the important, the themes of solidarity, equality, and sustainability are a complete anathema to the Trump administration. But I think without the Trump regime there disrupting, there is possibility that the rest of the world, ROW, can make some useful progress. We've already seen that with the bilateral that happened yesterday between the EU and South Africa, which is all couched and framed in language such as reliability, the importance of having reliable and trusted partners, which was a jibe between both the EU and South Africa at the unreliability of the Trump administration.
Anthony, to bring you in on that, I mean, as Tara suggests there, it wasn't just the fact that this is being held in South Africa. It was also the topics, the theme of the summit that led the U.S. president to boycott this. I do wonder at this point, if this is going to be a bigger summit, as Tara suggests, does that mean that Donald Trump miscalculated? Is he going to feel left out? And also, for that matter, worried that the rest of the world and Africa will turn its back on the U.S.?
I don't know if he's taken that into account, but it's certainly what's happening. I think there is a resolve by the countries that are attending to go ahead to support South Africa's policies, which are not controversial for most of them, and to basically issue some sort of statement at the end of the meeting. It is problematic because it's a bit hard to have a communique which is supposed to be consensual when the US isn't there. But I think South Africa is going to try and find a way around that. Whether it succeeds, we'll have to wait until Sunday to find out.
And what do you expect to be, just to follow up with you, Anthony, on that, what do you expect to then be in that communique? Even if there isn't broad disagreement on some of this stuff, there are issues like debt relief as well. What do you expect to hear there?
Well, I think we'll hear that. Also expect to have some language around climate and sustainability, and really pushing for, basically highlighting the inequality report that Ramaphosa ordered from Joseph Stiglitz, the acclaimed economist.
And Tara, to bring you in on some of the other nations that are there, China, of course, in particular, might be the key beneficiary. How will President Xi be looking to parlay his appearance into influence in Africa?
Well, I don't think Xi is himself is attending, but he sent his premier to, and unfortunately, that Trump not arriving means that there has been a lot of other downgrading. But for the other African countries that are attending, obviously the hugely important country on the continent is Nigeria, which is the biggest economy next to South Africa. And you'll have Bola Tinubu and a very large Nigerian delegation. And it gives those other countries a great opportunity to get their message across, which is about debt and inequality and in fact, ironically, trying to restore the rules-based order that a lot of these countries have actually complained against or bristled against. Reinforcing the importance of the multilateral institutions. So, nevertheless, it is a very important opportunity for all these other countries to rub shoulders with the great and the good from 19 countries.
And Anthony, I mean, as Tara mentions there has been some downgrading of participation as a result also of Donald Trump not participating. What does that provide for the feel of this summit from your end as well? Because one might argue that therefore the G20 could, of course, lose influence, although, as you mentioned, it will be going to the US for next year. One just wonders if there's sort of going to be an upgrading again at that point, or what your sense is of the role that the G20 plays right now.
Well, no doubt. The US's boycott of this final leaders meeting and their limited participation throughout the year has meant that the G20 status has been downgraded to a certain extent. I mean, South Africa has pushed on and done its best, and there has been some resolve from itself and other key members, including the member nations of the EU and the UK, to make it a success, but no doubt it has been downgraded a bit. And I think there is a little bit of disappointment that Xi Jinping didn't come to the summit, although he has been to South Africa many times in the past. And I think Javier Milei is not coming as well from Argentina. But otherwise, I think attendance is pretty good. And I think South Africa will still be pleased that most European leaders have arrived. And there will also be key presidents and prime ministers from a number of the larger global South nations.
Anthony Squatson of Bloomberg and Tara O'Connor of Africa Risk Consulting. Thank you both for joining us. This is The Globalist. It is 9:10 in Nicosia and 7:10 here in London. The island of Cyprus has been divided ever since Turkey's military intervention back in 1974, and deciding whether or how to accept that reality has been one of the thorniest diplomatic problems over the last many decades. And now it appears that Cypriot leaders are open to giving it another try. Greek Cypriot leader Nikos Christodoulidis and his Turkish Cypriot counterpart Tudan Erhurman met yesterday in the buffer zone between these two territories and have now said they're willing to restart talks led by the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. Well, I'm joined now by Haris Georgiadis, chairman of the Foreign and European Affairs Committee in Cyprus's parliament. It's great to have you on the show. Let's talk first of all about how this meeting yesterday came about.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity. Well, it's. I wouldn't read too much about this meeting because there have been so many meetings and efforts over the last half century. But in any case, there is a new Turkish Cypriot leader recently elected. He appears to be more conciliatory, so that explains, let's say, the heightened expectations that something may happen. I'm not sure if I share the optimism.
Haris, tell us a little more about that. It does sound like you are skeptical, despite the fact that, as you say, there is a new Turkish Cypriot leader who has sounded a little different from those in the past, although, as you say, this has been going on for a very long time. Is this change, in your mind, genuine?
Well, what is the key in my view is not how the Turkish Cypriot leadership thinks, but what is the approach of Turkey, of Ankara, of the Turkish government. So what the history, the long history of the Cyprus problem teaches us is that, let's say, the leeway of any Turkish Cypriot leadership should not be exaggerated. I'm not saying that there isn't an input from Turkish Cypriot leadership, but ultimately all key decisions, especially when it comes to the very sensitive issues of troops and security, that's not a decision for the local leadership of our Turkish Cypriot compatriots. That's a decision of Turkey. That's a decision of Erdogan. And all the policies of coming from Ankara do not signify a shift in policy. On the contrary, it seems that Turkey over the last 10-15 years has been adopting a more, a role which is more revisionist. It sees itself as the dominant regional power. It doesn't hesitate to openly challenge Israel, for instance. It doesn't hesitate to make claims even for Gaza, citing the old Ottoman rule of that region. So we have a regional power which so far has not indicated that it is willing to adopt a more conciliatory approach to approach the European Union in a more genuine manner to become more democratic domestically and to respect the rule of law in its international relations. So unless we see that, I would remain skeptical.
Haris, I do have to ask you about the Greek Cypriot side as well, though, on this, because there are basically intractable positions here, are there not, on whether there should even be a sort of two-state solution to this or a kind of federal model. What is the view from the Greek Cypriot side at this point on how this should be resolved?
It's not only a Greek Cypriot view, it's the view of the United Nations who act as mediators, it's the view of the European Union, it's the view of the international community that it should be a federal state. So one state, a federal one, but still it's going to be one state. So this is one of the key differences. There cannot be a federation comprising of two states. That's a contradiction in terms. That might be a confederation or a cooperation between two states, but it's not a state, albeit a federal one. So yes, a federation is what the international community and what the Greek Cypriot side is willing to accept and to discuss. It has to come with certain preconditions, self-evident preconditions, that it should be a functional federation, that it should be aligned with the EU acquis, because we are, and we want to remain a member state of the European Union. Actually, the European identity of Cyprus should be the ultimate safeguard for Greek and Turkish Cypriots alike. If, on the other hand, we have approaches which basically lead to a two-state solution in terms of, let's say, it is called sovereign equality. So if the Republic of Cyprus is an internationally recognized sovereign state, sovereign equality means that there has to be two internationally recognized sovereign states. That is not something that the Greek Cypriots will accept. That's not something which is aligned with international law and the UN framework. That's not something that the European Union would be willing to accept. So this is one of the sticking points. Another would be the presence of troops. We believe that troops have to go, otherwise there will be no security, and as I said, functionality that could be expected from any liberal democracy should be a precondition.
Haris, just finally then, with everything you described there in terms of some of the difficulties, the quite intractable positions between the two, even if there is skepticism, the fact that these two leaders have said they are willing to go back into this UN process to restart talks led by Antonio Guterres, what would that actually mean? What would those talks look like for you?
So they would. I would expect that they would be on the basis of a federation. That's the framework. That's the UN framework. You mentioned the framework of Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General. It is about a federal reunification of Cyprus. So that should be the starting point. And if that happens, then I may become a bit more optimistic that we may have an honest, let's say, effort about reaching a solution. We should, of course, see Cyprus in a regional perspective. As we have seen, the Eastern Mediterranean can be either a region of crisis and conflict and challenges, or it can become a region of collaboration and opportunities and peace. A resolution to the Cyprus problem on the basis of a federal reunification could facilitate the effort to transform the East Med into a region of peace and collaboration and not of conflicts. But once again, I would say that it takes two to tango. Let's hear it out clearly from the Turkish side, especially Turkey, the Turkish government, from Erdogan, that they are willing to facilitate the federal reunification of Cyprus, and let us have a fully fledged, let's say, effort to sort out the details.
Haris Georgiadis of the Foreign and European Affairs Committee of Cyprus's Parliament, thank you very much for joining us today. Still to come in the program.
What is the one most important thing our society needs?
That would be harsher punishment for parole violators, Stan. And world peace.
A clip from the 2000 film Miss Congeniality, all about sabotage and controversy at a beauty pageant. But how close is it to real life? We'll head to Bangkok to hear about the drama surrounding the Miss Universe contest. This is The Globalist.
Craft is a matter of perspective, a unique outlook, and obsessive attention to detail. With UBS's Chief Investment Office Houseview, we're focused on identifying the latest investment opportunities and market risks to help you achieve your financial goals, so you get the big picture broken down into thought-provoking insights. Delivered daily and curated by over 200 globally connected, locally active analysts. UBS. Banking is our craft.
You're back with The Globalist, and it's time now to continue with today's newspapers. Joining me from our studio at Dufourstrasse 90 in Zurich is Noelle Salmi, travel, culture and sustainability writer. Good morning to Zurich, Noelle.
Good morning.
Great to have you here. We're going to start with Belém and the COP30 summit that is ongoing there, because negotiators are trying to reach a final deal. But what is the latest on this big fire that broke out yesterday?
Yes, that's right. Yesterday afternoon, just after 2 local time, a fire broke out at the main entrance to the venue. And the scene was apparently chaotic, with people shouting fire and fogo, running out of the air-conditioned tents into the hot air. About an hour later, they started filing in, and then we're told, no, the entire area is being evacuated. We're going to open later. And I was looking at the Estadão newspaper this morning. Basically, they did not reconvene yesterday, and today is the last day of the event. So we will see what they managed to get done. A UN statement later said that the fire had been contained within 6 minutes and that 13 people had been treated for smoke inhalation. I have to add here, so I grew up in Brazil. My father still lives there. And every time Brazil has hosted an international event, we always kind of hold our breath, wondering, are they going to pull it off this time? Like 3 weeks before the Rio Olympics, the sites look like a construction zone, but they managed to pull it off. This time, there have been a lot of complaints. 1 week before the event, according to the Estadão, the UN was complaining of exposed wires. There had been torrential rains at the event, with water leaking in through the tents, apparently not enough food, poor AC and even with lax security, with protesters able to force their way into the venue earlier this week. So not really good optics for Brazil or for the COP event.
Certainly not the best optics, as you say. There have been a lot of issues around COP30. How is Brazil? Are they trying to put sort of a good spin on this? Are they able to? Because, as you say, this was their big moment, even if we've had these challenges.
Yeah, well, it's tough. German Chancellor Merz had come back to Germany earlier this week and said, wow, aren't we glad we left that place? And was attacked by Lula, by officials in Belém, which is a very poor city in the poor northeast region of Brazil. So initially, Brazilians had been very defensive, but now even the papers are beginning to question the organization. So we'll see what they manage to how they managed to come off with this.
We will, and we'll see how those negotiations go as they get back to it well into the night. But let's move on to another story that you brought us, Noel, from the U.S. Coast Guard. They're ending hate symbol labels for some, pretty hateful stuff.
It's really quite disturbing. So yesterday afternoon, the Washington Post wrote a piece, and then all the other U.S. papers have picked up on it today, that the U.S. Coast Guard quietly changed its regulations regarding representations of supremacy, racial or religious intolerance, namely things like swastikas, noose symbols, and other imagery from with Confederate symbols. And they basically changed the labeling to say that they would be punished they could be considered divisive only if they affect good order and discipline and unit cohesion. The new regulations even say that it is okay to display symbols widely identified with oppression and hatred in private spaces outside of public view. So following the Washington Post expose, if you will, on this sort of, it's noticing that they had changed their wording. The New York Times followed up, and Admiral Lunde, who is the top officer at the Coast Guard, said, no, we're still going to thoroughly investigate and punish the use of these symbols. So they're trying to tread a fine line between what is actually reasonable and what is being demanded by the Trump administration, which wants a loosening of harassment rules.
Well, trying to thread the fine line there, but as you say, when it comes to Washington, certainly this fits into a pattern of directives, doesn't it not?
Oh, it certainly does. I mean, when Secretary of War, it sounds terrible to say that, Pete Hegseth had reunited all of the senior leaders from around the world, the senior generals. He said the era of politically correct, overly sensitive, don't hurt anyone's feelings leadership ends now. So the Coast Guard is actually acting on directives, which also include removing any protections for any transgender Coast Guard officers.
Well, let's move on to a story where you are, which also feels controversial. Novartis wants to raise the cost of drugs that are sold in Switzerland.
Yes, that's right. So the CEO of Novartis said at an event earlier this week that they would like to see Switzerland raise drug prices. They've been wanting this for a while. They are controlled by government policy in Switzerland. But he's specifically acting in reaction to something that the Trump administration wants to do, which actually, this one is actually a good one, is lowering drug prices in the United States, which are absolutely out of control. And Trump has said that he wants to base the price of U.S. medicines on those that you find in Switzerland, Germany, France, Italy, Great Britain, Canada, Japan, and Denmark. Right now, there are no controls in the U.S., which means that it's a great place for drug companies, for pharmaceutical companies to make a whole bunch of money in the United States and charge exorbitant prices. So what he would like to see would be a slight increase in prices in Switzerland and in these other countries, so that they could still charge a lot in the U.S. They're threatening to release drugs directly into the private sector and not to make them available through the state insurance, sort of the basic insurance that everyone has to have in Switzerland, which would mean that if you don't have your own private insurance, or if your private insurer will go by case and doesn't want to pay for it, you would have to pay for those drugs out of pocket.
Noel, just finally as well, you have a more positive story from the Los Angeles Times for us about the Palisades fire and something that survived.
Yeah, I just love this story. The Los Angeles Times has this amazing photograph taken by an Associated Press photographer in January, right after the fires, where you see just this hillside of the Palisades completely burnt out in ash. And right there, kind of center top right, is this beautiful blue and white VW microbus. And it's such a funny story. Amy Weintraub, resident of the Palisades, parked her bus there after a day of surfing and then fled the area when the fire started. And then she next saw her car when she saw this image that had gone viral. People couldn't believe it was true. I mean, it was just this incredible image of this beautiful car that had survived, this van that had survived, and it sort of became a symbol of hope. And VW decided to jump on that and take advantage of it and restore the car for free. Now, the backside of it was actually pretty damaged. The mechanicals were not in good shape, but they fixed it all up and they previewed it to the press yesterday ahead of the LA Auto Show. And Amy Weintraub, the owner, as well as the AP photographer who took the picture, were both there to see it.
Good bit of branding there from VW ahead of the LA Auto Show. Noel Salmi, thank you very much for joining us from our studio in Zurich. You're with The Globalist on Monocle Radio. Now here's what else we're keeping an eye on today. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he's willing to talk seriously with President Donald Trump about a US-backed draft peace plan to bring about a just end to the war with Russia. European countries have pushed back against the plan, which would reportedly require Kyiv to give up more land and partially disarm. Japan's cabinet has approved a new 21.3 trillion yen, or $135 billion economic stimulus package, the first under its new Prime Minister, Sanae Takaichi, concerning some investors who fear the country's debt burden. The approval sent the country's currency to a 10-month low, prompting the country's finance minister to warn it was open to currency intervention. And Brazilian food products, including beef and coffee, have been exempted from U.S. tariffs that were first imposed in July. Brazil supplies about one-third of coffee imported into the United States. A 40% tariff remains on other Brazilian goods. This is The Globalist. Stay tuned. It is 15:31 in Beijing, 7:31 here in London. It's been about a week since Japan's new Prime Minister, Sanae Takaichi, sparked a firestorm by suggesting that a Chinese invasion of Taiwan could prompt a military response from Tokyo. Beijing has condemned the remarks and successively escalated things since, poking at Japan's territorial waters and airspace, suspending seafood imports and some film releases, and prompting some 500,000 Chinese to cancel their trips to Japan as well. I'm joined now by Alessio Patalano, Professor of War and Strategy at King's College London and an expert on Asian defense. Alessio, great to have you back on the show. There have been some talks between Japan and China in this past week, but it does look like they're not yielding any results, are they?
No, good morning. Welcome back to be on the platform. Yes, I think this is going to take a few weeks before the storm can calm down. And in some respects, this is the sort of situation that is not entirely surprising for the type of dynamics that what we've seen. What was surprising was somewhat the sharpness of the escalatory moves that Beijing put in place in response to the remarks, which we should sort of remind the audience that were not something that was planned ahead. The remarks on Taiwan were in response to a question that was posed to the Prime Minister. And the Prime Minister actually, for something that was not planned, had a relatively carefully worded response. She was very clear to present the subject in the context of if military action were to be considered. She specifically said this is not if any action takes place, we will be considering some sort of involvement. It's only if the well-being of the Japanese people, which in constitutional terms is one of the very few instances in which the Prime Minister and the government would have to consider what to do next. Notwithstanding that, reactions were indeed very, very strong. So it will take some time before either side can actually roll back from the current situation. And certainly for Beijing, Taiwan remains a core issue, and that means that it will take a certain period of time before even any de-escalatory move can be put in consideration.
And Alessio, the way you describe all of that, both Takaichi's remarks, somewhat careful, and China's response, what would a walk back then actually look like? I mean, if you look at China's reactions, what do they want Takaichi to say that she might be able to say?
I just think that whatever Takaichi is going to say is irrelevant to the question. This is this has been completely sort of self-constructed by the Chinese. The Chinese decided to be offended. The Chinese decided to escalate. It's for the Chinese to recreate the condition. This was purely an early move in order to create some sort of a power play to establish certain dynamics with the relationship. So the choreography here is very much in terms of how Beijing will make it look that the Japanese are proving to be respectful. And I think in this respect, we've seen already yesterday, the Japanese national television was noting how on Chinese social media, images of a senior diplomatic representative from Japan and China meeting together, they were portrayed like they were paying respects in a very apologetic sort of behavior to their Chinese counterparts. So I think some of this theatre will be absolutely central for things to go back. Whether Takaichi is involved in this or not, that remains to be seen. But as things stand, it seems very much that this is very much about how Beijing will read the room and help through its own social media, its own domestic platform, to make it possible to bring things back to normal.
Alessio, even if China's response here was not necessarily planned, or if you will, this was a reaction to these remarks from Takaichi, there are other things that have been planned this week. There's a new aircraft carrier brought into service, which China has been kind of showing off. There's apparent civilian exercises going on. I mean, in that sense, is China getting more confident in its military might right now?
I think you're absolutely right. China is getting much more confident. But let's be absolutely clear. What was not planned was the fact that then Takaichi would be asked the question. The way in which the Chinese reacted is absolutely part of their playbook. So in that sense, there is a standard sort of behavior. There's a tactical opportunism from a political point of view that the Chinese have displayed already with a number of different actors, from the Philippines to Australia to some of the European countries. So, the fact that it was going to happen last week was not planned. But everything else, in a way, is a set of responses and behavioral sort of attitudes politically that are absolutely pre-planned. Same thing, China is on a trajectory, and Xi Jinping has been clear since the very early stages of his sort of leadership in 2012-13, that military power would underwrite the return of China as a leading actor in international affairs. So this is all part of that journey. And military exercises, training opportunities, because of their pre-planned nature, become really important, if you want, signposting events that allow to underwrite this process. And if other political sort of circumstances are taking place, they will be connected in order to showcase where China is going, that you have to respect China, and that China's sort of emergence as a preponderant power in that part of the world is absolutely inevitable.
Alessio Patolano of King's College London, thank you very much for joining us today. You're with Monocle Radio. Now, as it is Friday, it is time for Andrew Muller's weekly news roundup, What We Learned.
We learned this week that J.D. Vance had been sent to prison for 2 years. Not that J.D. Vance, though.
Aww.
At least not yet. We learned that Michigan citizen J.D. Vance of Grand Rapids, big hello to all our listeners in Grand Rapids,
Hello!
had indeed earned himself 2 years in the clink for, and here is where it gets confusing, threatening the life of Ohio citizen J.D. Vance of the Vice Presidency of the United States. We learned that J.D. Vance had menaced J.D. Vance and other public figures in a series of ill-advised and intemperate social media posts. However, we learned upon further research that J.D. Vance, not the Vice President, the other one, may not be entirely with us, and therefore perhaps not strictly representative of any trend to the effect that people sharing names with public figures may be more likely to represent a danger to said public figures, which would have been a statistically alarming development for example, Congressman Chris Smith of the New Jersey 4th, but perhaps reassuring for the less usually named likes of Oletha Faust Goudreau, a member of the Kansas State Senate, and what an absolutely excellent name that is, as all right-thinking people will surely agree.
I think so.
Yeah.
Although, given that we spent all afternoon researching distinctive names of American politicians, would be remiss not to elicit a few cheap laughs from the more easily amused sections of our audience by acknowledging this guy.
President Trump needs you on April 1st. Vote Trump-endorsed businessman Randy Fine. Randy Fine will help President Trump save Social Security.
Although Congressman Randy Fine is not and can never be any match for the sadly retired...
Now live from Manchester, New Hampshire, a U.S. Senate candidates debate between incumbent Republican Bob Smith and former Democratic Congressman Dick Sweat.
Or indeed the also former
Butch Otter, our future, our governor.
Tempting though it would obviously be to while away the rest of this monologue and perhaps the rest of this week, chuckling at the lexicon of Americans elected to public office over the years by their fellow citizens, despite being encumbered with names that seem a sort of open-ended license to stuff them into lockers, one thinks, as one often does, of Wiley Nickel, Ruffin Pleasant, Napoleon B. Thistlewood, Xenophon Wilfley, Outerbridge Horsey, Furnifold Simmons, and Young Boozer III, and we made up none of these. We learned that many more contemporary follies were here to command our attention, including an example of a head of state bursting into song.
Oh no.
And not just any song, the worst song ever written. It absolutely is, and you know it. Musically inane, lyrically vacuous, and culturally pernicious, has spent half a century reassuring total fatheads that they are good people for insisting that the world's problems can be solved by everybody somehow simply getting along, no thinking or learning required.
I think so.
We learned that the latest politically and actually tone-deaf karaokeist to seize a microphone and honk his way through John Lennon's regrettably inextinguishable anthem for the medically half-witted was Venezuelan president, as of this recording, Nicolas Maduro.
Alfred Nazaret, ¿cómo era la canción de John Lennon? Imagine us people.
But sticking with the subject of eccentric demagogues known for an almost fetishistic relationship with a 1970s hit by New York City-based artists exulting in a prospective utopia of brotherly love, we learned another lesson in media management from US President Donald Trump, who does not, we learned, care for follow-up questions, especially from women.
There's growing controversy today over the president's treatment of a reporter aboard Air Force One.
Quiet, Piggy.
Yep, he really did call a female reporter Piggy, as she was peppering him with uncomfortable questions about the Epstein files.
However, we learned, as we invariably do, that the president is in no way accountable for his own behavior.
The White House is defending the president today and blaming the reporter, Catherine Lucy of Bloomberg News. This reporter behaved in an inappropriate and unprofessional way towards her colleagues on the plane, a White House spokesperson says in a statement. If you're going to give it, you have to be able to take.
And we learned after tinkering with this section of the script for longer than you'd believe that it is no easy thing to engineer a seamless link from the ongoing debasement of public life in the highest places to someone stuffing matchsticks up their nose, so let's just have some silly Scandinavian folk music. For we learned of a new benchmark in the, to be honest, not hotly contested field of stuffing matchsticks up one's nose. Actually, hotly contested, that's pretty good, and we only just spotted it. We learned that the previous world record for stuffing matchsticks up one's nose, 68 by Denmark's Peter von Tangenbuskov in 2024, had been convincingly smashed by Swedish usurper Martin Ströby, who crammed not fewer than 81 matchsticks into his clearly capacious nostrils. We learned from subsequent questioning by agog local reporters that Mr. Ströby had embarked on this venture for the most honourable of reasons, as will now be voiced by Monocle's People Stuffing Matches Up Their Noses desk chief, Chris Chermak.
As a father, I want my children to look up to me. With that in mind, I really wanted to make them proud and think that they have a cool dad.
If it's any consolation, he does have 81 matchsticks stuffed up his nose. For Monocle Radio, I'm Andrew Miller.
Thank you, Andrew, also for that cameo. I do think I'll stick with doing the rest of this show without matchsticks up my nose. This is The Globalist on Monocle Radio.
IQ, EQ, and AI. 3 components key to the craft of innovation at UBS. Because to stay ahead in a rapidly evolving age, you need a partner with decades of experience, endless passion for the work, and a finger on the pulse of leading technologies, bridging human expertise with artificial intelligence, all to elevate you. UBS. Banking is our craft.
It is time to talk arts and culture now with Gabe Bullard, a journalist based in Basel, who joins us on the line now. Gabe, good to have you on the show.
Good to be here.
Let's start with Frida Kahlo, somebody we've been talking about quite a lot, actually, this week, because there's also a new museum of Frida Kahlo in Mexico, and then there's been this big painting auction yesterday.
Yes, one of Kahlo's works, El Sueño La Cama, which means the dream, the bed, sold for $54.7 million at auction. This is the highest price paid upfront by a work by a woman artist. Though adjusted for inflation, it is slightly less than was paid for a Georgia O'Keeffe painting in 2014. Though at the time, that was a number much lower than $54.7 million.
Certainly, and it's been a big week, though, for art in general, hasn't it? How does this kind of fit into the bigger picture that we've seen this week?
Yes, there have been a few other high-profile auctions this week that have fetched quite high prices, some surprising a few of the observers. Maurizio Catalan's America, which is the solid gold toilet, sold for $12 million to Ripley's Believe It or Not. Gustav Klimt's portrait of Elizabeth Lederer sold at Sotheby's for just under $237 million, which is the second most expensive sale of art at auction ever. So these prices are a sign that perhaps the market is growing after a few years of decline, or perhaps there have just been a number of lots for sale that have drawn new attention.
There have been a number of lots, but at the same time, just another word on Frida Kahlo herself. Does it show that she is still somebody who is, pretty popular around the world?
Oh, yes. I think since the sort of rediscovery of her works in the 1970s, there has been this huge upsurge in her work. She's probably one of the most famous artists out there right now, and you don't have to look very far to see tributes to her work. I see her paintings on T-shirts when I'm out and about. There's a restaurant nearby that has a replica of one of her paintings on the wall. I think that she has become such an iconic painter now that any of her works going to auction are going to be fetching these high prices, and when they're on display, they're going to draw very large crowds.
Well, Gabe, let's move on to some film news. The big film news that we have had this week. Wicked 2 is out. What do you make of it?
There was skepticism about splitting it into 2 parts. They've made these 2 movies longer than the stage show, which was a smash that the film was based on. And it seems like it's getting mostly good reviews, a few pans, and a lot of sort of medium to somewhat exuberant praise as well. I think the fans are going to turn out in droves. I know that already some screenings have been pretty packed. Is it a sign of maybe more sequel addiction? We saw that they split the Dune movies into two parts and everything like that, and it seems like a big ask to ask viewers to come back to the theater after seeing one part, or maybe settle for only half a movie when they go, but it is turning out here. I think the other big lesson, though, is that people tend to like music when it's on screen.
Well, that is the other side of it, isn't there? On the one hand, it's the sequels. On the other hand, it's bringing Broadway to film, which, I don't know, I have to say, personally, I'm kind of skeptical of, or at least it's really nice just to see a musical in person. But are people enjoying this revival of Broadway on screen?
It really seems so. And no matter what your taste in film, it seems like there is something for you right now that is Broadway themed. Richard Linklater's new film, Blue Moon, is about Lawrence Hart, who, of course, was the famous lyricist. That is not a musical, but it is a movie sort of taking place all around Broadway. It's set on the day of the premiere of Oklahoma, which Hart was not part of, though his former partner was. And also, there's going to be a filmed production of Merrily We Roll Along for any Sondheim fans who couldn't make it to New York. Though I should say that Linklater is also filming Merrily We Roll Along, but he's filming it over decades. So if you're really wanting to see it, you'll have to wait till 2040.
That is a long time to wait for a film. And I have to admit maybe that being in London, we do have the privilege of having the West End here. So maybe not something that everyone can enjoy. But we wanted to also, Gabe, get a little bit meta at this point, because you brought us this story about everyone talking about film criticism.
Yes, I feel like I've read more pieces about the craft and the work of criticism lately than I've read actual criticism. Every time I open a publication now, there's an essay about what is happening to critics. We saw earlier this year, the New York Times shuffled some of its critics to other beats. There have been changes at the music site Pitchfork. There was also the New Yorker essay from Califasana arguing that music critics are perhaps too nice. I think what we're seeing is that criticism is, like journalism in general, in a pretty dire state. Staff jobs are on the wane, and there's a lot of growth among influencers, and some might have some interesting information, some good points of view, but the platforms that they're on don't necessarily support the kind of in-depth consideration that we used to get in print or online.
Well, I find that interesting. I mean, it sounds like you're saying, I guess that is true of other things too, like that criticism is moving elsewhere, or is there a problem with criticism itself? Are people kind of tired of the critics?
I think that people maybe were tired of critics in their old sort of gatekeeping role, but it seems like people are really seeking out any sort of qualitative evaluation of a work. You see it on sites like Letterboxd or Goodreads, people checking the star ratings of everything possible, whether it's a household product they're buying online or a new movie or book or television show. So I think there is that hunger, but there is maybe some confusion about what criticism is actually supposed to do and who is really qualified to be doing it.
Well, I'm sure criticism won't ever die completely. But Gabe Bullard in Basel, thank you very much for joining us today. You're listening to The Globalist on Monocle Radio. Finally, on today's show, it is 14:52 in Bangkok, where in the last few hours we have heard
Miss Universe is Mexico!
Yes, the results of Miss Universe are in, but only after the entire pageant descended into something of a farce in Thailand this year, with 2 judges resigning and accusing the organizers of rigging the competition's final 30 entrants, charges that the organizers have denied and in turn banned one of those judges from ever participating in the competition again. It is almost as much of a soap opera as when Donald Trump was in charge. Well, I'm joined now by Monocle's Gary Boyle in Bangkok. Gary, good to have you on the show. Were you watching?
I was not watching. I was watching X have a meltdown as the winner was announced.
That's something. What kind of meltdown was X having?
X was very fond of Miss Philippines and thought she would have been the first choice So Miss Mexico, after quite a dramatic month involving Fatima Bosch, the winner, there has been some disappointment in Southeast Asia, to say the least.
Well, then what do you make of the winner? Because this is also related to the controversy that we've seen for Mexico. Was there a bit of sympathy there? She had been in the spotlight after being berated by one of Thailand's directors.
Well, it's to give you some background on the whole event. It's been like 3 months of tantrums and tiaras, I guess. To kind of explain the background behind the whole drama, the Miss Universe organization is jointly owned by Thai and Mexican interests. And they've been sparring the whole month with disputes over intellectual property. But one of the sparks of that conflict was the Thai director reporting some of the contestants to the police for allegedly advertising online gambling sites from their Thai hotels. So I think that sparked off some kind of Mexican standoff, some kind of standoff between the two countries, which escalated throughout the past 3 weeks.
And then there's also been this thing about the judges. Just tell us about that and just what the world has been happening. How has that been covered over there?
Well, we lost 3 judges 3 days ago, and the final was this morning in Bangkok. 2 of them left for what they said were personal reasons, but one of them did claim that there is some secretive cabal of judges behind the public face of the judges that had chosen the 30 finalists. So it's sprinkled this element of intrigue into the whole pageant, which I think has ended up with more eyes on the pageant than there would have been otherwise.
Well, that's a good point. Are there more eyes on it or not? I'm curious even what this pageant really meant for Bangkok, the fact that it was there.
I think possibly globally these 4 main beauty pageants have seen a little decline in popularity. It seems a bit archaic, the very fact that we're still having these things. But it's been a hugely popular pageant or competition in Southeast Asia. Over the past few years, we've had Thailand, Indonesia, and the Philippines. Their women doing very well in the contest. So it is a huge big deal over here, and it's kind of culturally seen as a path out of poverty. And I know that Miss Philippines, her speech this morning was that very beat. That, with hard work, you can, fulfill your dreams and all that kind of thing. So, yeah, it is a big deal for Thailand to host. They hosted in 2018, and that was said to be one of the more popular or better events in the past few years. But it's also been a bit of a black eye because of the negativity around the Thai organizer who made a bit of a spectacle of himself a couple of weeks ago.
There was the spectacle. And then to go back to the Philippines, then the fact that she did not win, is it because also this was in Southeast Asia that you're seeing such a reaction to that on social media? She was sort of the local favorite.
She was definitely this morning, as the contest was unfolding this morning, she was getting a lot of positivity across X. It is a big deal in Southeast Asia. I think the drama has kind of overtaken the fact that she was a good candidate. She didn't even place in the top 3 today. So there will be a lot of controversy, I think, over the fact that these 2 co-owners of the franchise, Mexico and Thailand, have been fighting. And then they took the top 2 spots in the competition.
That's a good point. So does that mean that there might, I don't want to, make you speculate here, Gary, as the analyst, but does anyone trust the result?
Well, if you're fond of conspiracy theories, you could say, well, Fatima Bosch, Miss Mexico, she was at the heart of this scandal. She was berated publicly by Mr. Nawat, who is the Thai organizer. Really a bad look for an international beauty pageant to have the contestants shouted at by a man. So there will be some speculation online for sure that whether this was kind of an apology or some kind of fix, but or is there a secret cabal behind the actual judges? Who's to say? I wouldn't like to predict.
Gary Boyle, thanks for trying to predict conspiracy theories. Gary Boyle in Bangkok, thanks for joining us. That's all the time we have for today's program. Thanks very much to our producers, Carlotta Rebello and Laura Kramer, our researcher, Joanna Moser, and our studio manager, Mariella Bevan, with assistance from Desiree Bandley in Zurich. After the headlines, there is more music on the way. The Briefing is live at midday in London, and The Globalist returns at the same time on Monday. I'm Chris Chermak. Thanks for listening.
With UBS, you have a truly global partner, incorporating new technologies, innovative approaches, and unexpected opportunities, leading you to insights that help answer the questions that matter, delivered with passion, care, and unmatched expertise. Because it's about rising with the dawn each day, knowing that we can do even better. That's what banking is to us. Not just work, but a craft. UBS. Advice is our craft.